So here's the thing that no one wants you to know. Excellent service can save a bad meal, but an excellent meal can be ruined by bad service. We think it's time that the front of the house got the spotlight they deserve. Welcome to Dine Dish, where the business of dining meets the art of hospitality. Welcome to another week of Dine and Dish. I'm Michele DiMeo, of course, the Restaurant Diva. And today's show is going to be super exciting. We're going to be talking about location, location, location. As everybody knows, choosing the right location is either a make or break for any type of concept, whether it's restaurant, it's retail, anything. And I have an amazing guest today. We actually met a few years back when Jannar and I were looking to do a project in New York City, and we went on this tour through the city. And fast forward 2, 3 years, we kind of reconnected. So let me introduce him, and then we can kind of talk. But I have Lee Block on the phone. He's the president of RTL, which was formerly the Winnick Realty Group. It's a retail brokerage company out of New York City, and he represents both the tenant side as well as the landlord side in leasing efforts in New York City, tri-state, nationally, and also does some consulting. So I'm super excited to have you here. Hi, Lee.
Nice to speak with you, Michelle.
I know, can you believe full circle? We spent all this time in New York City. What was it? Was it 2 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago. We were looking for full service restaurant spaces in Manhattan, and here we are 2 years later, back on
I
the
know, I know. Reconnecting through Evan, my friend Evan here in retail, and we're
he's the man.
as I know, right? We'll have to like give him a little shout out and get him on the show.
100%.
So, as you know, we're getting ready to relocate to the New Jersey area, and I reached out to Evan just to kind of talk to him about different locations and what's going on, and he was like, "Oh my God, you need to talk to the best. You got to talk to Lee," and here we are on the phone.
Well, I appreciate the time to talk today, and obviously working with you and Gennaro has been great, and look forward to getting more done together.
Yeah, yeah. So, before we get started with our topic, you just had a fun vacation, just getting back.
I was
You actually
wondering
get a vacation?
I was wondering if that was going to come up. Yeah, we like to say it's more of a trip than a vacation, but my wife and I took our two sons to Disney World for the last week, and it was actually exceeded expectations, and it was a great trip. And then we had an 8-hour flight delay and didn't get home till 3 in the morning last night. So
Well, that's why I brought it up, because my next question to you was, how was the flight situations? Because I mean, what's going on is crazy. They're canceling so many flights, and I mean, everybody I talk to, they're saying hours of cancellations and flying nightmares, and so I was wondering how that was
it
going.
was it was pretty nuts because every flight in and out of Newark had a problem. We were just lucky that we didn't get canceled. And we stayed at the hotel. We spent the whole day at the hotel with the kids and had a great day and went to the airport at night. And it just was a really long, long night with two little kids, but we made
Yeah.
it work. It could have been a
Yeah.
lot worse, let's just say.
Yeah. Well, you know what? With everything going on, I mean, e- everything's crazy. New York, change of, I don't even want to get into government and
Yeah.
politics, but the change of what's going on there, the government shutdown, flights being canceled. I mean, everything's changing. And I mean, that's also, we're going to talk a little bit about like the whole big picture in the city. I mean,
Hmm.
we're focusing right now more on New Jersey than we are New York. So, let's jump right into our show today. As we opened up the show, we talked about location, location, location. You hear this all the time. And I'm sure from large groups to small groups to mom and pops to big conglomerates, everybody's looking for that perfect location. So let's talk a little bit about the big picture. And if
Sure.
you can kind of talk real estate, commercial in New York City right now. I know you do some work in Jersey. So why don't we just start right into the current state of the market?
Yeah, I think it's like you said. Location, 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 but what are you after as a tenant, as a restaurateur? We're helping clients. You guys are out there looking for the spaces that you could be the most successful in. And what does that mean? It means revenue, it means sales, and it means providing the best experience to your customers. So that tracks a lot of different things. You need to make sure that there's volume potential. You need to make sure that the spaces that you have curb appeal, that the traffic is the right kind of traffic at the right times. It's like in our business, we always say there's the going to work side of the street, and then there's the coming home from work side of the street. Well, which side do you think the coffee shops want to be on? They want to be on the going to work side of the street. The people that are, providing services for people that are home during the day and daily needs and things like that, they want to be in the residential neighborhoods, not in the office districts. So it's important to understand who your customer is and where they are and when they're there. And then you can start making informed decisions about, okay, this neighborhood might be better for me than that neighborhood. And, this is the type of space that I'm looking for versus something different.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When you talk about foot traffic, visibility, accessibility, all the different key factors that everybody looks for when making a decision on location and what's ideal for a restaurant or retail. How do you go about figuring out? Do you use AI? Do you use a feasibility study? I mean, the first thing I always ask is, okay, what's the foot traffic? How many cars come to that light? How many people come in and out? I mean, obviously, you can go through trends and you can look at other restaurant sales, but what really are the key factors and how do we know if those key factors are even accurate?
It's a very good question. And I think you can't trust every source of information that you get, and you can't just go off of the data and the numbers that you read in reports and things like that. It's all very important. You're a restaurateur. I'm sure when you're looking at a space, what do you do when you have a prospect that you're looking at? You go there, you touch it, you feel it, you walk the neighborhood, maybe you talk to other business
Yeah.
owners in the area, you talk to the customers that are on the street. You take a real picture of that space, of that neighborhood, of that area, and you get a feel for it. You have to have that gut feeling that something's going to work or it isn't going to work. And in that vein, you're going to put that together with the data. And we always look at all of the demographic information, who the customers are. We look at what their incomes are, what their profiles are, and if it works for the type of restaurant or the type of business that we're looking to place into that location. So not every
Yeah.
space is right for every business.
Yeah. So what you said is a huge key factor. I mean, when we find a location that we like, whether it's for fast casual or full service, I mean, obviously different locations yield different types of concepts.
Hmm.
Gennaro does that. I mean, he stalks them. It's funny. I'll call him. I'm like, "Where are you?" He's like standing in front of the restaurant. But he does that. He stalks it. He goes at breakfast. He goes at lunch. He goes at dinner. He goes during late night, and just to see the type of customer that's walking around. He walks into other businesses. He talks to the managers over there. Just to confirm whether the sales are really what people say they're doing,
Right.
so it's true. You definitely have to confirm, because I mean a computer can only do so much. You're producing a report, but obviously we always say trust but verify.
Of
Right.
course. Yeah, like you can get all the reports you want and you can get all the comps you want, and someone might give you sales numbers from their restaurant. Those could be from 2019 and then the pandemic hit, or it could be, before they downsized their space from 5,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet, and now their sales are less than half of that, but you don't have
Yeah.
the context of where that number came from.
Right.
The census data is always 5 years behind a lot of the time. So it's really important, like you said, like Gennaro go stand on a street corner for an hour or two and talk to people in the neighborhoods. That's what you need to really get a good feeling for, before you can make a commitment. These aren't short term kind of relationships that we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you said something very important too. Post pandemic, things have changed so much. You know, guest traffic patterns have changed. Jannar and I were having lunch yesterday, and one of the things we talked about is Annapolis Mall, which is right here where, I
Yeah,
mean, miles from where our headquarters is. It has changed so much in terms of tenants. I mean, when 15 years ago, that mall was bumping. I mean, it had Nordstrom's, it had the best tenants throughout the entire mall.
right.
Now you look at it and it's just whatever the landlord can get to sign, a long-term lease or even a short-term lease. That we were looking around and we're like, the craziest tenants are here. And it was so funny because even my little 6-year-old, she was like, yeah, they kind of not, none of them kind of make sense, do they? And I said, okay, even my 6-year-old sees it. So, I mean, post-pandemic has made huge, everybody started shopping online. So even for retailers, the brick and mortar kind of went away.
Yeah, to some degree, it got challenging in certain areas and it got stronger in others. And I think now we're 5 years out of that. And I mean, at least where I'm sitting in New York City, in Manhattan in Midtown, the offices are back and
Yeah.
people are in the city. The business districts in New York and other cities across the country are definitely back to where they were prior in terms of the population, the daytime populations, and the strength of the workforce in these major cities are the people that the retailers and the restaurants are looking for. So if you want to open up a great restaurant in New York and you want to appeal to, a younger, educated, high income type customer base, you might have used to say, or previously you would say, well, maybe I need to be in the West Village, or maybe I need to be in Soho, where these people go out at night and where they shop during the day on the weekends. But now you might say, all right, there's business districts that make sense. There's enough people on the street for lunches, for dinners, for corporate events, things like that in the business districts to open up another area that I can open up a successful restaurant versus just looking to where people live or where they shop or where they play on the weekends.
Yeah. So one of the things you brought up for sure, I agree with you 100%. I mean, in terms of rents, I mean, even hotels,
Yeah.
the rates of hotels in New York City, I remember right after the pandemic, certain hotels we stay at all the time, five-star hotels were seven, eight, $900 a night. The same hotels today are 2,200, 2,500. It's crazy to me how in 5 years things have changed so much, and everything's just like you said, everything's back to where it was pre pandemic. But in terms of these rising rents,
Hmm.
tighter margins, I mean, we're seeing, like you said, everybody's back, everything's going up, especially New York City. As a restaurateur, and this is important to me, this is a question maybe you can answer. How do you balance having that prime location visibility? So look at the spaces think of the spaces we were looking at 2 years ago. Those
Right.
awesome corner spaces under these beautiful five-star buildings. How do
Hmm.
you balance these huge rents? Because I mean, we were looking at it and everything was $1 million a year, 1 million 2. I mean, that was kind of the number across the board in the city. But how's that financial sustainability? So you want the balance of a prime location and visibility because you're a restaurateur, but you also need to have the financial stability and sustainability to be able to keep it that 10-year range, because we're not going to do it if we can't get a 10-year with 2 5-year renewals.
Yeah, at least. And no one's going into a venture like that for the short term, right? The upfront costs are way too great, and you need 10, 15 plus years to amortize those costs, to return to your investors, and to make it worthwhile for you and
Right.
for all your shareholders, stakeholders. So when you look at a space, a lot of times I like to look at it um, and back into the numbers. So someone might say, "Oh, the rent's $1 million." That sounds like a lot of money on paper, but if there's 5 restaurants in the area and they all do $15 million in sales, and that's a 7.5% uh, ratio
Right.
of
Yeah.
sales to rent,
Yeah.
7.5 is pretty good for a restaurant these days. And maybe you could push it because you're a great operator and we could get it down to 6% or 5%. I think everyone would be very happy with a rent at that level, even though
Right.
it's $1 million and that, sounds like it's just a big number on paper. So you go back to what we were talking about, uh, where I'm going to bump into Gennaro looking at the customers on the street,
Right.
and you need to feel it. It needs to make sense. You have to feel comfortable that that location works for you. You have to make sure that the sales potential is there. So if my projections say I have to do at least 10 million out of this restaurant for, for me to justify the costs and rationalize the rent, plus all the other costs that go into the business that, makes it successful, then I can make an informed decision. And that location, maybe it's in the corner, maybe it's at the base of a hotel, maybe it's at the base of a beautiful new office building, or it could be tucked away.
Yeah.
There's different ways to incentivize people to come to you, and a lot of times there's intrigue to that. It doesn't have to be right in your face when you turn the corner, and there's other concepts that you might have where you need to be at the hard corner, at the traffic light with parking right in front. Maybe it's more
Yeah.
of a grab and go concept. So each concept, each restaurant has its own variables that you need to solve for. But there's a lot of options out there, and there's a lot of ways to find a great space that can work depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah. So with everything going on, I mean, obviously a lot of offices shift to working remote. And then you just brought up a lot of employees are now going back to the office. I mean, even my daughter who works for a big accounting firm, they're back in office 3 to 4 days a week.
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot of New York, and I mean, obviously we don't have a lot of high rises here and businesses here in Maryland, but I heard a lot of the office. They're doing these office to residential conversions, and they're doing more of a shift. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if that's still going on. That's kind of what I heard, but what do you think the
Yeah.
shift in the dynamics, is going to how's that going to affect restaurants and retail? I would think, the office obviously gives us a huge draw for lunch. I mean,
Hmm.
we look at that, because obviously we want the offices, we want the businesses for lunch, but now we have more residential. That's a shift for dinner. So it's going to change up the whole day part,
It,
So have you seen any type of dynamic or any type of change for restaurants and retail with all this change and conversions?
Yeah, for sure. So it did two things when the city, when I say the city in Manhattan, when they changed some of the zoning codes, they allowed for quicker and easier conversions of some of these Class B and Class C office buildings. And
Yeah.
when people were working from home, the offices were being underutilized and people were giving back space and buildings were emptying out, and there was a question what to do with all the space. So convert to residential. Okay, sounds like an easy prospect, and the city made it a lot easier for a lot of these buildings to convert. And what it did was it made the better office space more desirable because now there's less supply of office on the market, and
Right.
it took these underutilized buildings and a lot. I mean, looking out my window now, there's probably five major office buildings, at least a 500,000 square foot buildings that are being converted to apartments. This is bringing 5 6,000 units to certain neighborhoods and certain stretches of the city that does exactly what you were saying. It brings more evening population. Weekends are now more occupied in an area that businesses used to be the primary source of bringing customers to your restaurant. Well, now there's 5,000 more people that live in that neighborhood. So
Right.
it's making it more dynamic for the businesses in those neighborhoods, and it helps everyone.
Yeah. So here's another interesting question.
Yeah.
Now we're doing a huge shift to residential, and with this whole political nightmare going on in the city, I feel like it's a tug of war. There's like a city divide. You have so many people that are for and against all the new political stuff going on, and I don't want to get
Yep.
into a political
Yeah.
conversation on this.
Same.
But now we have, I know, right? Now we have all these residential units. And I've heard so many people are now leaving New York again. It was like pandemic hits, everybody leaves and runs to Florida. Pandemic is now over, political pandemic hits, and now what's going to happen? Are we going to have that mass exodus again? Because I mean, we were looking at places. I mean, we're moving to Jersey, and
Yeah.
we found our perfect place. But we were looking at these penthouse kind of lofts near Hoboken, and the two real estate agents that we were with, both of them were like, "Oh, we're having all the high end money coming out of New York, looking at places right really close to the city, obviously, because what's going on politically." So now we have this shift to huge residential conversions and a lot of residential pieces. What's going to happen? Are they going to fill them? I mean, everyone always wants to live in New York, but now you have this crazy shift. I mean, I don't know.
I
Real estate
think,
is definitely a changing entity, huh?
yeah, look, there's macro things that are affecting the markets, and there's micro things that are affecting the markets
Hmm.
on a smaller, you know, street level scale. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of immediate fear and shock and awe to what's going on, and the new mayor in the city, the rest of the political environment around us in the city and in the country. But at the end of the day, New York City is still the center of
New
commerce
York City
here.
is New York City. I love
It
New York
brought,
City. So you don't
yeah,
have to
like,
tell me, it's my
right,
favorite place in the world.
right. You want to go shopping. Where else are you going to go to get world-class shopping in the
Right.
US?
Right.
The best shows. We still have some of the best restaurants. And when you come up here, we'll have even more of them. The best hotels, the best entertainment, and this is where the workforce is. I mean, JP Morgan just opened up a 2 million plus square foot office building with 10,000 employees. Those employees aren't moving to Florida. Like,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
there will be short term, fear, and we will overcome it. The city and the country has overcome challenges, every cycle.
Yeah.
And look, if some people move out, it's opportunity for others that are going to come in and swoop in.
Well,
And
that's what my sister-in-law said. She said she's
yeah,
waiting because she said the perfect place is gonna come on the market and she's gonna grab it.
it's 100 exactly. And
Yep.
in 3 years, you're going to look back and you're going to say, wow, remember when everyone was
Mhm.
scared about this? Even 5 years ago, remember when COVID hit? I mean, it was a terrible, unfortunate thing, but the environment for lots of commerce and business was like unbelievable opportunities for people. And just in my world, like watching the people that bought buildings for pennies on the dollar, and businesses that rented spaces for 15 and 20 years at half of what the market rent was just 6 months before, because
Yeah.
landlords were scared and didn't know what was going to happen. And now those tenants and those restaurants have these great deals for the next 15 plus years.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So turning it back towards the restaurant side
yeah,
of things, because obviously, this show's all about service and
yeah.
hospitality and choosing the right location. I'm sure you've probably seen success stories and mistakes and, the restaurants that blow up and do amazing and then those that have the challenges. In your experience and what you've seen, what do you think the biggest mistakes for restaurateurs in choosing the wrong location? Because I mean, obviously, everybody wants the right location, but if you had to give them tips on, I've seen this happen, stay away from these types of locations. What would be your golden rule?
I think I think there's two things that go into it. So the location, like you said, we could talk about staying away from the wrong location. And I think a lot of times you'll get a restaurant who is being very, I won't say stingy or cheap, but they're watching every dollar, and
Yeah,
they want to make sure they don't overspend, and they want to make sure they return to their investors, and all of these prudent things that, a restaurant should be thinking about. But they might pass up an opportunity where, if I paid $5 a foot more, I could have been on the corner instead of in line, or I could have been, at the better shopping center than the one that I'm at now, or I could have been, on the 50-yard line in the middle of Manhattan versus, tucked away on the back of the building, if I paid just, incrementally more, 5%,
Right.
10%, 15% more, my sales might jump by 50%.
Yeah.
And when you think about that rent ratio that we were talking about, 5 to 10%, you're very happy as an operator. If I can, make my sales go up by 25, 30, 40, 50% because I made a better real estate decision, even though it might cost a little bit more, that incremental increase in sales is well worth the extra few dollars that you might pay in rent. Now, it doesn't always equate to that. Um, the other part of it that I will say, and you're a big proponent of this also, having a really good product. And that's not just the food that comes out of the kitchen, but it's the service, it's the ambiance, it's the
Absolutely.
atmosphere. And
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
and you can have like a phenomenal location in front of the world. It could be in the middle of Times Square where 5 million people walk by every month or whatever the numbers might be. But who the heck wants to walk through Times Square to go to a nice restaurant? Like, not really that many people. But
Right.
you might have the best service in the world and it's tucked away on a quiet street in a nice neighborhood that, I don't see it every day because I don't always walk down that street, but I know that you're there. And I know when I come in, I'm gonna be greeted. It's gonna be really homey. It's gonna be a really great environment. There's good drinks, there's good food, there's good activity and energy. I'm going to go out of my way to go to a place like that versus that other spot that doesn't really offer, those types of attributes. So it's really a strong balance and you have to hit it on all aspects because there's a ton of competition. And if you don't do it right one time,
Yeah.
you risk losing that customer forever because there's other places for them to go.
And it's hard to win them back.
It's way harder to lose someone than it is to get them to come back.
That's definitely true. So, you definitely talked about percentage of rent, and most restaurateurs. You mentioned 7%. I mean, we would love to be 7%. I think with today's numbers in terms of rent trends, I mean, we're looking more at the 8 to 10%.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
if we're in that 8 to 10, we're happy. But you said something interesting and very important. Adding that $5 more per square foot to have an A location, you're going to do, even if you do $10,000 more per week, your hard operating numbers stay the same. So your payroll and all the numbers in that same space stay the same. So your profits are higher. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes you look at it, and we've done it too, where we're like, oh, that's a second generation, and they're $5 less a square foot. But if we go across the street, it's a little bit more and it's a better shopping center. I mean, every restaurateur, I think, has struggled with that at some point. It's like, oh, it's $5 less a square foot, but the more sales. I mean, we had that problem in Florida. I mean, full disclosure. I mean, we screwed up. I mean, and that's why one of the things I said to you before we started this whole podcast was, when we moved to New Jersey and we
Hmm.
do this full service location, doing a feasibility study is very important, because it's important not from just the traffic, the foot traffic, who your customer is, what are they making, the demographics, economics, blah, blah, blah. It's, is this concept also going to work for that neighborhood? So doing a feasibility is important. But in Florida, when we opened, we saw this amazing location. It was under the Bank of America building. We're like, goo goo gaga. We had Del
Right.
Frisco's on one corner, Lobster Bar on the other. And we're like, oh, if they're doing it, we should. But you said one important thing when we started this show: you can be on one side of the street and hit it out of the park, and you cross over to the next side of the street and they don't do any numbers. Well, we
Right.
were on the corner that we should have been on the other side of the street.
On the
So
wrong side of the street.
on the
Yeah.
wrong side of the street. And it's funny that one block can make such a huge difference in the numbers of a restaurant. It's crazy.
And look, the demographics aren't going to tell you the difference between the east side of the street versus the west side of the
Absolutely not.
street. That's where you have an instinct and you have to, this was another point that I was going to make. You have to partner with the right people, and it's like the relationship that you and I have. You probably have the same relationship with your architect. with your general contractor,
Of
with,
course.
the people that are doing the feasibility studies and things like that. You have to be able to trust those parties, those vendors, to give you the right advice. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's signing the lease, that's taking on the obligation to open the restaurant, to hire the staff, to feed the people that are coming. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders there.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
you need to have the right team. One more thing that I'll say, and you asked me about success stories, about things that make a restaurant work and things that don't make a restaurant work. Well, you have to have the right relationships, not just with your own team, but with the other side. And the tenants and the landlords typically get looked at in a different way. And it's usually the landlords that are grilling the tenants and saying, all right, send me your financials. What experience do you have? What kind of concept? Let me see the menu. What are your hours of operations? What do you expect to do here? What are your sales going to be? But what's changed a lot in the last 5 years, I would say, probably since COVID, maybe a little before that, the restaurateurs are being a lot more selective about the projects that they associate themselves with. So it's not just to protect your brand, which is always important, and you don't want to be associated with, a project that isn't on brand for your concept or your restaurant group in general, but also who are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis? Who's that
Yeah.
property manager? Who's that landlord? Who are you going to call, at 1 a.m. when a pipe bursts? Who are you going to call to shovel the snow during a blizzard when it's the landlord's responsibility and the super is out sick that day?
Yeah, for sure,
You
100%. We've walked away from leases because of that. So, we
as
get
you
it. I
should,
mean,
as you
it's the
and
writing on the wall. If you have a problem now during lease negotiation, can you imagine what's gonna happen 3 years from now if you have a flooded basement or your flooded kitchen or the whole building goes out? I mean, what do you do? Are they gonna be
it's
your partner in this, or are they gonna say, "It's your problem, deal with it"?
signing a lease. We always say it's so cliche, but signing a lease is like getting married, right?
Yeah,
And it goes both ways. And if it's not going to work, you better break it off before you sign that lease and you send those checks in, because then you're bound to the letters of the lease. And that's when lawyers get involved, and you start spending money for the sake of spending money. And at that point,
and that's not fun.
it's never going to work out at that point. So,
No.
we try to
So
vet we want to vet everything out early on, and then everyone is successful. And
yeah.
if you do well, then, we do more business together.
Of course. So you mentioned leases. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to talk a little bit about leases because for anybody that listens to our show, whether
Hmm.
they're a small business owner, a restaurateur, whatever, that's the big scary elephant in the room. For somebody that's a new business owner, the thought of signing a 10-year lease or personal guarantees, if we can talk a little bit about what that means
Yeah.
if for new listeners, but personal guarantees are, 1 year rolling and all this different legal legal lingo that goes on.
Mm.
If you had some tips for our listeners on negotiating a lease or purchase agreements or any type of advice for new restaurateurs, would you mind sharing some tips with us?
Yeah, of course. I think you need to know what you're getting into. And it goes back to what I was saying before. Have a really trusted team by your side. So whether it's your broker, like if I'm in your corner helping you out, explaining what all of this means and coming up with alternatives to what, the landlord might be trying to propose, or making sure that your attorney understands what your limitations are, so that you're not agreeing to something that is, out and above and beyond what your goals are for that space. So, like you said, there's different kinds of guarantees, whether it's a full personal guarantee, whether it's a limited personal guarantee. A lot of times there'll be clients that will say, I can't sign a guarantee, I just won't do it, I'd rather put up a larger security deposit.
Yeah, or a letter of
There
credit.
Yeah, or a
Yeah.
letter of credit. There's guarantees of completion of construction. You mentioned a 1 year rolling guarantee. So at any point in time, if you break the lease, you at that point will then be obligated to pay 1 year ahead of rent and whatever other monetary obligations there are in the lease to get off the hook, if you will. And if you
Yeah,
don't, then it goes back to the personal guarantee for the full lease. There's a lot of details in this that, I don't want to get too in the weeds and
obviously. You don't want to
make it
get
make
too
it
detailed. You'll
make it
scare
too
too many new people out there. Don't
make
sign
it
any
too
leases.
exactly, exactly. But with the right people, you can navigate this. And look, everyone started somewhere. Everyone signed their first lease at some point in time, even
Yeah,
the biggest companies in the world. So there's ways to get it done, and it's about having good relationships with the people that you're literally getting into bed with. So
yeah,
just know what you're obligating yourselves to and what you're signing. And if you do what you're supposed to do and the other party does what they're supposed to do, hopefully the lease, stays in the drawer for the full 10 or 15 years.
yeah, which is the nice thing. You don't have to
Hmm.
deal with it, and everybody makes money.
Exactly.
Landlords, operators, restaurateurs.
If you're a successful restaurant in someone's portfolio, in their building, in their office tower, residential tower, if your restaurant's successful, it means you can pay the rent on time every month. It means you're bringing a great amenity to that property, to that project, that shopping center, that neighborhood, which only helps everything else that's a part of it. So
Yeah.
if I'm upstairs, now I have a place to go, to eat on the weekends. Or if
Oh, it's a
I'm
win-win for everybody.
yeah, and you can cater to the neighborhood. That's the goal. The goal is for it to be a win-win-win for everyone involved. And, it doesn't always go that way, and we know restaurants turn over a lot. Um, but
Yes,
a
I'm in the
g-
best the best category for the show. Sometimes I think I used to say retail is so volatile. I think restaurants are definitely more volatile than general retail.
I would put restaurants in the retail bucket and say
Woo!
you're the most volatile of all the
We're the
retail.
top of that funnel
Yep,
for
that's
sure.
for sure. But
Yeah,
when you do it well and it goes to plan, I mean, the sky's the limit. There's restaurants in New York that do 30, 40, 50 million dollars a year in sales.
yeah, for sure,
And
yeah. We have
and
some here too. I mean, there's
yeah,
some high grossing revenue as well in Annapolis. But Lee, can you believe our show is over? I told you the shows go so fast. We can talk
wow.
restaurant leases, locations for years, I'm sure.
Well, hopefully we'll be talking about it again soon. Next time you're up here, we'll be seeing some new spaces, and let's see what we can find for
Oh,
you.
absolutely. We're going to start in Jersey and then move into the city. But
Look,
for listeners that are, whether you're streaming, you're on Instagram, obviously our DMs are open. We love to hear from you. I'm happy to answer any questions. We're always looking for ideas for shows and topics. And Lee, before we leave, can you believe Christmas and New Year's is 6 weeks away?
it's
I saw
insane.
this weekend, it's 48 days.
It's insane. When I saw you last, it was Halloween,
I
and
know.
that was the talk of the town. And now it's middle of November. Thanksgiving's around the corner. The holidays
Yeah.
are right behind it. Hopefully it'll be spring before we know it after that, and the weather will turn
Oh, yeah.
again.
And then our restaurant will be open in Jersey, which would be really nice.
If you can get it open that quick, you then
Maybe one of the small ones, not the full service.
we'll be writing books about you then.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that should be another show on what it takes to open a restaurant, from permits to all the legal building compliance and sustainability and all the stuff that goes into opening a restaurant. That should be another show topic.
Yeah, you need hours to go through that.
Exactly.
We'll do that another time.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for coming on and being our guest,
It
and
was a
I look forward to
pleasure.
seeing you soon. And for everybody listening, thank you once again for another amazing episode of Dine and Dish. And I will talk to everybody soon. Have a good evening, Lee. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you
Thank
again.
you, Michelle.
Uh
Bye
huh.
bye.
Bye.